Here we are with a terrific opportunity to speak with one of Grammy Award-winning artists from Australia. You don't often get to say that, but Luke Smallbone is our guest from King and Country. And I tell you what, with his brother Joel, they have taken music across the world by storm. They've been magnificent, the two Aussie boys who, with mum and dad, migrated out of Australia to the United States back in the early 90s. And with us is Luke Smallbone. Hi, Luke. How you going?
I'm going good, man. We were saying off air how good it is just to hear another Aussie's voice, because over here in America, my voice is being compromised. You see, I'm not as Australian as I used to, but the blood that runs through my veins still is. So it's a privilege to be able to chat for a minute.
It's great to have you, Luke, and with Joel, your brother. You've been such a fantastic promoters for the country that you come from, the land down under. And I want to take people back, because many won't know of your earlier story and why you ended up in the United States and formed this incredible band for King and Country. But your dad and mum, David and Helen, who back in the 70s and 80s brought Christian music like Amy Grant and David Meese and some of the bigger names of that era to Australian shores, and they were just incredible promoters of music in that era.
Absolutely, yeah. So my dad was a concert promoter, as you mentioned, in Australia, and he'd bring Amy Grant back, he'd bring Striper back, Whiteheart, Carmen, all of the different folks that you're mentioning. But actually, on one particular tour that he brought back to Australia, the tour didn't go very well, and we actually ended up losing everything that we had as a family. And so my dad was looking for a fresh start for his career, and so he got a job offer in Nashville, Tennessee, and he thought it would be a good idea to move his 6 kids and his wife, who was pregnant at the time, to the States, and that's exactly what he did. But soon after we arrived in the States, my dad lost his job, and so we like to joke that we did all the things that Americans don't like to do, which is rake leaves and mow lawns. And eventually my sister, she became an artist and got signed to a record deal, and her name is Rebecca St. James, and we ended up going on the road with her. And then years after that, Joel and I thought, well, we may as well give it a whirl as well. And here we are now getting to chat from, I'm actually in Louisville, Kentucky on set. We're working on a film kind of based around that story. And we're chatting now. I'm walking like on a little subdivision over here as we chat with you guys over there in Australia.
It's fantastic. Great to hear about this movie that you're making about David and Helen Smallbone, because from very, very early starting in Christian contemporary music in Australia, they've now launched out to the biggest careers, both you and Joel, but also Rebecca, your sister. I mean, I loved her album. That she won a Grammy, by the way. I mean, people may not realise this, but an Australian girl won a Grammy, Rebecca St. James, with the album Pray.
No, that's right. Look, it's interesting. I don't know if you're parents yourself, but parents do all of the things that actually make people. They shape people. They impact their lives. And so this film we're working on is called Unsung Hero. And really, at the end of the day, I think parents become people. They become unsung heroes continually. They do all the things that shape the hearts and the minds, but get none of the credit for it. And most parents, I think good ones anyway, are good without the credit. But in this case, we're making this movie because I think there's a power in demonstrating what the families that stick together. My parents probably had every reason to not stick together, if that makes sense, when it comes to some of the financial struggles and career struggles that they had. But because of their faithfulness, obviously to God and then obviously to each other, there was something explosive took place, and we got to see faith demonstrated through their marriage and through family, and it's shaped the rest of my life.
Yeah, fantastic. Luke Smallbone is our guest from the band for King and Country. Together with his brother Joel, have become international music sensations. I want to take you back to before you were an international music sensation, Luke. I want to ask you about you and your brother. Yeah, in high school, did you form the old rock band in the family garage?
No, here's actually what took place. So we I've grown up around music my whole life, obviously, dad being in music. Sister went on the road with her. I became a lighting director at one point. Joel was a stage manager, did background vocals towards the end of what she was doing. I did a little background vocals as well. And I wanted to play sports. That's like a good old Australian boy should. I wanted to play sports. And I was playing basketball in high school. and I actually tore my ACL in my left knee in my 11th year. And I kind of pretty quickly realized, as I probably should have a little earlier, that you're not going to become a professional athlete. Like my body was breaking down. I'm like 16 years old. Anyway, I actually went to my mom. I was like, Mom, everybody else in the family's got the things that they're good at, and here I am. I thought sports was that thing, and I got hurt. And she said, look, I believe that by the time you graduate high school, there's going to be one thing left for you to do. And so sure enough, I graduate high school, and soon after that, Joel comes to me and says, hey, man, what do you just think about writing some songs and singing on some demos? And that was really the beginning of our pilgrimage. We started writing songs, worked on that craft for many, many years, wrote more terrible songs than I can count. And that was the beginning of what is now For King and Country.
Yeah, I guess is Luke Smallbone, half of the duo For King and Country. In 2007, you launched Osterville, and then the two of you under your own names were performing. And then in 2012, For King and Country. Now, this is the question that I've been wanting to ask. What made you name the band For King and Country?
Well, we kind of quickly realized after the Osterville debacle, when nobody knew how to even say the name, and then when we just went by Joel and Luke for a while, we also realized that, that's not a very creative name. And so we wanted something that had some sort of regal, that felt international, that felt purposeful. And so one day, Joel had come into the studio with the phrase, all the King's men, and our producer at the time spun around in the studio. He's like, now what about For King and Country?
Wow.
The old British mantra, the old Commonwealth mantra, I should say, that they used to chant before going into battle. And I think at the end of the day, it's kind of a little bit of a mission statement wrapped up in one, because the reason why we do music is we do for King, we do music for King and, for God, and country for people. And so that's the reason why we went with it, because it felt purposeful, it felt meaningful, and that's something that we'd all really longed for.
The album Crave came out under the name For King and Country. The Proof of Your Love, a really big hit. My favourite on that one actually is Middle of Your Heart. So really good sound, a really good radio sound. And suddenly, For King and Country's getting airplay across the United States, not just in the Christian connections, but right through into the contemporary radio world.
Yeah, no, very fortunate in that regard. One of the things I do love about, well, hopefully a song that's a good one, is that it crosses, I've often said that there's two genres of music. There's good music and there's bad music. Yeah. I just so happen to be on the side of hoping to write good music. And what's cool about being over here, obviously even going back to Australia and around the world, is people want to hear good music. I think sometimes there is certain people that think that there's certain boxes, and if you have that type of genre of music, you can't get played over here or over there. And at the end of the day, hopefully if it's good enough, people willing to play it. And, we've been fortunate to be a part of some songs and to work with some people that have believed in us and given us opportunities. And, it's kind of what's led us to being able to have this conversation here today.
Well, I'll tell you what, Run Wild, Live Free, Love Strong, fantastic album title, but the songs that came off of it, magnificent. But I've got one song I want to ask you about, and that is Without You. And it features your wife, Courtney. And I know that about this time, you went through a real crisis. Can you explain how that occurred, and obviously the song reflection on that?
Absolutely. So, when we started out for King and Country, first album came out, we were working really, really hard. Obviously, weren't sleeping much. We were in these tiny little vans going around all over America, setting up our own gear. I mean, the slog was tough. And I started to notice that I wasn't feeling well. I started actually losing some weight, and I actually got diagnosed with the disease during that time. And I got so sick, I was probably thinking to myself, I think I was about 26 years old, felt like I was still invincible, even though I could see myself kind of suffering a little bit. And eventually it got to a point where I actually couldn't go back out on the road. I got so sick, and things got a little scary there for a minute. And I was off the road for about 3 months. And during that time, I lost a ton of weight. I'm a 6'4" man, and I got down to about 125 pounds. Couldn't tell you what that is in kilos or stones, but I was very, very light. And the doctors get worried about when you start losing that much weight, that you just lose so much heart muscle that you just die of a heart attack. And so I was walking through that journey, and at one point, my wife kind of just shook me out of probably my subtle self-pity, and also shook me out of like, we got to get you well. And she said, "Luke, I just don't, you can't leave me yet.
Yeah.
You can't leave me yet." And so obviously when, we came to working on this new project, that was one of the phrases that I just couldn't get over. Like, there was so much, when you walk out the door and your spouse says, "Hey, hurry home," or "I miss you," or, "Don't leave," whatever it might be, that's all wonderful, right? It's a great thing to hear. But when your wife is pleading with you to fight back for your life,
Yeah.
there's a different desperation. There's a different level of love that is revealed in that. And that was really the heartbeat behind writing that song, Without You.
Yeah, fantastic. The King and Country becomes a booming success, but you're not even out on the road because of sickness and illness. Family steps in. I know that Joel and his wife, Mariah, and your brothers and sisters stepped into the breach. I know that they help out in a whole range of different aspects on tour. How did your family, outside of just your beautiful wife, Courtney, how did they step in and assist at that time?
Well, one of the biggest things, I'll tell you a quick story of something that was really, really tangible, and then I'll also, tell you some of the other just nice things that took place. One of them was part of the issue is if you get into the science of it, I basically had too much inflammation in my bloodstream, so I had too much of this chemical called cortisol, and what it ends up making happens is it's very difficult to sleep, and so I was on a medicine that also tried to keep me awake. It was miserable, and I couldn't sleep. I would toss and turn all night. And one of my brothers, I think it was actually Joel, he said, "Hey, man, what's something that we could do that you think you help?" And I said, "Well, I don't know, but I just can't sleep." Well, one day he showed up, and they had bought me and my wife an entirely new bed.
Oh, wow.
And it was just like, my old bed was creaking, and it was a terrible mattress, and there was this this Tempur-Pedic bed that they had organized. That was one thing. They were all very supportive and coming over. I was pretty miserable and probably slightly depressed, to be honest, because you start getting that sick, you're just not quite yourself. And I had brothers that would just come sit with me.
Yeah.
No agenda. They'd just come and sit with me. They'd be there for a few hours, and we would chat. I probably wasn't a very good conversation at that time. And they'd just come sit. And it taught me a little bit about, sometimes when family's going through things, you want to say the right phrase, but sometimes just your companionship and just being there is actually the thing that people need the most. And, outside of my wife and kids, my immediate family was certainly that during that time.
I know that you've drawn on your Christian faith through your music. I hear it in the songs. How did it really, I guess, make the rubber hit the road, to coin an Australian phrase for you over there in Nashville? But, I mean, how did it hit the road in your faith at that stage?
Well, look, I think that, especially when you're a young man, I think you subtly feel like you're invincible, right? Well, you don't say that because you're going to die at some point. But when you're faced with mortality, you do start asking some bigger questions. And I think for me, I felt like it was, I think that I probably was trying to earn grace. If I was totally being transparent, I was out here, and I would remember actually praying a prayer. I was like, "God, I'm out here trying to write these songs for you, do these performances for you. I'm trying to do all these things." And I think subconsciously I felt, and this is how you repay me? I get sick? I just don't understand. And I felt God very clearly say to me in that moment, "Look, I've never been about your songs. I've never been about, what you're trying to accomplish with your life. I've been about the fact that I just want to spend more time with you. I want to be you. I want to rescue you.
Yeah.
Allow me to rescue you." And I think that, when you talk about rubber meets the road, I don't think I've been the same since then. And to be honest, I've had a lot of people come up and say, "Oh, I'm so sorry that you got sick." And, you hear this from time to time, but sickness became a gift for me. Yeah. I've had the privilege of struggle in my life. And obviously struggle's relative. You go to other countries and you see just unbelievable struggle that I've never faced. Mm. But you know what? I know what it feels like to be sick. I know what it feels like to I nearly lost my youngest son at one point. We've gone through some things in life. Yeah. And it changes you, and oftentimes it changes you for the better.
Yeah, beautifully said, Luke, and the grace of God is sufficient even in the worst of situations. That comes out, I think, in the 2018 album, The Song, and you'll think this is so funny for me to pick this up, but you will know that I love your music. Oh, God, forgive us. And I want to ask you, there's a magnificent sound in this song, and it comes in at about 3/4 of the way into it. It's a moving ballad, and the pipe organ absolutely explodes. And I absolutely love this sound. I mean, who arranged that magnificent sound?
Oh, well, we get to do it all together. One of the things I've always marveled at, that just even the organ sound that I love, is that you can have nothing else going on, and the organ is so big and so wide that it just takes up the whole stereo, if that makes sense. The whole wall that is that we basically have exposed to us in our human ears. And I that whole song came from that there's a lyric, I prayed the prayers with no reply. Yeah. And that was the way I felt when I was sick. But what I've realized is it was like, man, I shouldn't be someone that was hoping for this, like, hey, I did this tit for tat type relationship with God, and that's where that "Oh God, forgive us." And when that organ comes on, and you start singing those lyrics with the white flag sailing through the night, that's the ultimate surrender. It's amazing what people can do if they surrender their lives. It's amazing what you can do if you give up control of your life. And I think that song is our best attempt to try and illustrate that.
I'm talking with Luke Smallbone. He's our guest today with his brother Joel. They're the 4-time Grammy Award-winning actor for King and Country. I'm going to ask you about the next album, Burn the Ships. Now, this is where you put the same organ song in Burn the Ships. Now, was there a reason for it, or was it just a subtlety of bringing back the connection with "Oh God, Forgive Us" from the previous album?
Probably you're getting into my love for the organ sound there a little bit. No, well, Burn the Ships is still in the era of struggle. A little bit of a personal story. So during the pregnancy of my second son, about a little over 7 years ago, my wife accidentally got addicted to some pills called Zofran. Yeah. And they're anti-nausea pills, totally accidental. And she just called me up one day and said, "I've got a problem. Like my body is saying I need more and more, and I'm freaking out." And so anyway, I left the road then as well. I come home and I found my wife shaking. It was just a terrible experience. The next day, I took her to a mental health facility, and we did outpatient therapy for about a month during that time, and then obviously ongoing therapy for quite a long while after that. And one of the things that you deal with all of us, I think, have gone through, obviously, bouts of probably mental health or mental illness and in needing mental health. But when you go through these chronic things like that my wife walked through, you feel this degree of shame. You feel this degree of, like, I'm weird or I'm crazy. And one of the thoughts that I had heard was this idea of burn the ships, which is kind of the old, the story of, a commander going to a new land, and he's there to conquer. And while he's there, he realizes that they can't go and conquer if they have a retreat. Yeah. And so they're looking back over the ocean. They see those ships. And it wasn't until that command of burn the ships took place that they felt like there was no retreat. They had no choice but to move forward. And I think that illustrated a point for a lot of us in life, that we're holding on to some of our hurts, and and in some cases we even hold on to our shame. But if you can burn it, you can't run to it anymore. And I think that song is is us trying to talk about, what if you never returned to the issue? What if you never returned to the problem? What would that do for your future? And so in some cases it was a song that I wrote for my wife, because I was right there with her, walking through some of those very, very difficult moments.
Oh, yeah. Flush the pills, face the fear, feel the weight disappear. We're coming clean, we're born again, so our lungs can breathe again. The words from Burn the Ships, you get to that part of the song and it really does impact, and powerful lyrics. I'm talking with Luke Smallbone. He's our guest today with his brother Joel. They're the 4-time Grammy Award-winning actor for King and Country. And he has got a song off of that same Burn the Ships album. And I can't help but ask you, about 12 months after you released the album, a lady called Dolly Parton entered your lives. Tell us about how you come to do a duet with God Only Knows.
Yeah. Yeah, I was actually out of the country, and I got a text from my brother saying, "Hey man, I've just reached out to Dolly Parton's management about doing a feature," and I was like, "Man, what's he gonna do with small fry like us? Like she's not gonna want anything to do with us." And yet the story is that we had actually Joel had actually led a kind of a boys' Bible study for some young youth years prior, and they actually had become her junior managers. All right. And so we called him up and said, "Oh, well, A, you owe me, but B, what if you play this for Dolly and just see what she thinks, what she thought about it?" And ironically enough, she had just said to her manager before, "Hey, I want to get into more inspirational music. I don't want to just do the same thing I've been doing. You know, if anything comes across our table, let's consider it." And so sure enough, it wasn't a couple of weeks later that this song kind of crossed the table, and she was just like, "Hey, I think this is one of the great songs I've ever heard. Would you have me?" And I was like, "Would we have you? I think that we'll think about it. Yes, we'll have you." And so sure enough, she comes in, lends her voice to it, and really, you know, it's this. One thing I've realized about music is you can sing it from your own vantage point. I think that your fans and your supporters, they listen from your vantage point. Yeah. And when you take another character and somebody like Dolly's voice, and they're singing lyrics like "God only knows what you've been through," and we all know that in an entertainment world, Dolly Parton's been in it for like 60 years. As a female, can you imagine what she's been through with her career, the things that have been said, the things that have been done? I mean, just unbelievable stories there. So when she sings those lyrics, God only knows what you've been through, God only knows what they say about you, but there's a kind of love that God only knows. There's a different weight to it. There's a different significance, and she was an absolute delight to work with, incredibly kind, incredibly generous, and really grateful that she would take a moment to believe in us.
Yeah, I tell you, it won the Best Christian Song in 2019, and I tell you what, the film clip, if you haven't seen it, there's a little scene there where a long-haired member of King and Country, Luke Smallbone, looks like he's laying in a hospital bed. A little connection back there to God only knowing what you went through a few years earlier.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. That whole music video is kind of really about maybe the potential. In my case, it was real. For Dolly's, she was a lady of the night. She played a lady of the night. Joel kind of played an addict, and I kind of played someone who had walked through sickness. And it was definitely a nod back to some of the things that I've walked through. Not to put any more attention on it, but it felt authentic because, look, that's what I walked through.
Yeah, I tell you, it felt authentic. One of our family members was going through a massive issue at the time, and you asked earlier about have a wife and 2 daughters, and so we're all impacted by certain things. And that song was what she played over and over again, and God only knows how valuable that song has been in not only our lives but countless others. Going to move to something that you did in 2020. You released a Christmas album, Little Drummer Boy. Now, this is my take on it. I've listened over and over to the song. Our front office is got a beautiful woman there called Kelly, and she does a wonderful job. She actually answered the phone when you called in, and her words were, "This is the best Christmas carol that my little girl requests," because she just loves to play this song. And I haven't heard such an inspirational arrangement of a old song but made into a really new song. I reckon since Cliff Richard's The Lord's Prayer. That's how high I rate the version of The Little Drummer Boy.
Oh, man, I got to pay you after this conversation. It's like a wonderful endorsement. No, yeah, so, it's funny. We didn't really think that much about it. We went and did a Christmas tour quite a lot of years ago, and I grew up playing drums, so we've always been into drums, and we're like, well, we absolutely have to do the Little Drummer Boy because we like drums, and we just did this version of the Little Drummer Boy, and we were in a church, rehearsed them up. We did a whole show in like 2 days, just rehearsing up the songs. Didn't think that much about them, just did them, and then went out and toured it, and everybody kept responding to this version of the Little Drummer Boy, and I was like, well, maybe we're onto something. So we go into the studio. And it probably becomes one of the most significant things that we've ever been a part of. I mean, we literally just took the name of the song literally and put drums on the song. It was like the Little Drummer Boy should have drums on the song.
Yeah.
And it became something that, we do Christmas tours every year now because it's something kind of explosive that was shocking to us. I remember the first time I sung it in the studio, and I remember thinking to myself, I've never actually learned the lyrics of the song. And I couldn't believe how beautiful it was that this song is really just about a little boy who doesn't have any other gift, but he can play a drum.
Yeah. And
he wants to play that drum for Jesus. That's what the whole song's about. And I just thought, how often are we not like that little boy in that song? We don't have much. Sometimes we don't have that much ability or that much of a gift, per se, but yet still that's something that's worthy to be played for Jesus.
Yeah, my guess is Luke Smallbone, together with his brother Joel, write some of the most brilliant music, but they also perform some of the most beautiful words from others. The album in 2022, What Are You Waiting For, is released, and I'm going to say I saw a film clip the other day of you blokes on stage in front of a massive crowd, and an absolutely brilliant version of your song, Love Me Like I Am, bringing Jordan Sparks onto the stage. Brilliant. Her voice coupled with your harmonies. If you haven't seen the clip, guys, have a look at it. We play the song here on the flow, but it is magnificent stuff, Luke.
Oh, you are too kind to us, man. I'm going to need to have at least a call with you like once a week just to get built up. You're so kind. But, man, that song, once again, going back to even the Dolly Parton comment, that song, when you start introducing a new character and you introduce a female voice, You Love Me Like I Am, it just carries different weight. And obviously she's a crazy singer. I mean, I remember being in the studio out there with her in L.A., and I'm just like, man, I can't even get close to singing like this girl. Like, this is not even a contest.
Yeah.
She's just gifted. And, when you have people that are gifted like that, conveying a lyric that hopefully rings true, it's very, very special.
It is, and I'll tell you what, you've got some terrific artists that have come on. What Are You Waiting For? The song Together features Tori Kelly and Kirk Franklin, who many know. Unity features Dante Brown. Harmony features Sleeping at Last. But when I listened through the album, and I do actually love Me Like I Am, but I think of moving my new favourite song to one of the songs that may be more obscure to folk, and that's a song called Cheering You On. And for me, it felt like a reflection on that people out there actually are barracking for you individually. They actually are on your side, and that quite often we think no one cares about us. And there's actually a great cloud of witnesses it talks about in the Bible in Hebrews of these folk that are watching on our lives and cheering us on.
It's one thing I love about art is that you can have a concept, you can have a thought, and it can be interpreted a million different ways, but the hope of what you're trying to convey can still remain the same. The story behind Cheering You On actually is my oldest boy. He's a deep thinker, and he just comes out of nowhere with these very, very heavy-handed questions at times. And he came up to me one day, and he goes, "Hey, Dad." I said, "Yeah, man." And he goes, "Hey, so you're going to die one day, huh?"
Great.
Out of the blue. And I'm like, "Yeah, man. But I'm only, at the time, I was like, I'm only 5. And he looked at me and he's like, "You're 35? You're going to die tomorrow," was what he was thinking. I was like, "Man, I'm not that old yet." But anyway, I said, "Well, man, why do you say all that?" And he said, "Look, obviously I don't want you to go."
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, man, here's the deal. It may feel like I'm your world right now, but hopefully Dad's got many, many years left. And that by the time that you have your own family, maybe the day that I'm not here with you, maybe it won't sting maybe quite the same way that it does now." And he looked at me and he thought about it and he goes, "Yeah, okay." And then he said, "Well, Dad, I'm going to learn everything I can from you until that day comes."
Oh, wow.
And it was just a powerful moment. And so then I started asking myself, well, what would be the things that I would teach him? And so that song is me cheering him on, but it's basically all my hopes for him, all my hopes for his life, all the hopes and dreams that I have over not just things that I hope he does, but a lot of times it's the people that we are that is far more important than the people, but than the things that we actually achieve or the things that we do. And that song kind of talks about those very things.
Yeah, some brilliant music on this latest album from For King and Country, the album What Are You Waiting For, including Relate, God Is With Us, the song Seasons, which has got the words day after day, night after night, I'll be with you through the seasons. Brilliant stuff about obviously the love between you and your partner and the children that you have. The reality of it all is that we in Australia love for King and Country. We believe we own you still, even though you left our shores when you were kids. And Luke, we want to know, when are you coming back to tour?
Oh, man, I was just having discussions about this not that long ago. Look, there's nothing to announce yet, but it's always at the forefront of our brain. It's just, I mean, I hate to say it like this. It's so much more complicated than it is perceived because, you know, you go back to Australia, you bring in a lot of people over, there's a lot of production, there's all those types of things, all the normal things that we know. Yeah. But still, nonetheless, it's something that we desire because, truthfully, going back to Australia, I think it was in 18, I believe, or 9, whatever. I think 18. It was one of the highlights of our. It was just one of the highlights of our careers. To be able to go back there, you know, because you're never quite sure how you're going to be perceived when you come back to a place that, we were young boys when we left, and it was just there was such a welcome home, a big bear hug, and we were trying to come back as quickly as possible, and then the pandemic happened, and so it's on our agenda to get back there, you know, just as soon as possible.
Oh, we'd love to have you back. Luke Smallbone, who's half of the band for King and Country with Joel. They've got a massive support crew, the family support and the lights and management and sound and stage. They put on some of the most brilliant concerts across the US right now, featuring some of the biggest acts around the world. And we've had a privilege of having Luke talk about his personal Christian faith and how it's impacted his life. It's been a joy to have you on board this morning and on our shows later on. We do thank you for your time, Luke.
Hey, man, thank you for the time. You've been a beacon of encouragement for this soul over here in Kentucky working on this set. So thank you very much for the time, for your support, and look forward to being able to chat in person sometime soon.